Welcome to MXSA Maritime Corporation's Marpol Briefing. This orientation aims to provide you not only knowledge of maritime pollution Annex 1 to 6, but also an awareness on the protection of marine environment. After this session, you will be asked to sign an undertaking. Why do we need to protect the marine environment? About more than 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans. The oceans are a significant source of oxygen for our planet, and are instrumental in the capture and storage of carbon dioxide. Marine provide important ecosystem services, such as the provision of food, rain, minerals, medicines, livelihoods and transport of goods. They also support tourism, recreational activities, and shipping industry around the world. What happens when marine environment is polluted? It ruins our beaches or oceans. It destroys marine life. It depletes oxygen content of the ocean. It risks exposure on the lives of birds. And affects food chain, which may harm human health, due to toxic waste. What will happen without the oceans? We will lose our source of fish and other marine animal birds, which migrate across the ocean's beaches for recreation and tourism shipping transport. How can you help protect the marine environment? We must keep our ocean and seas clean and free from all forms of marine pollution. We must ensure that we will always keep our beaches and seas, including access to sea transport, clean. We must help to preserve our marine resources, for ourselves and for future generation. Sources of marine pollution. Land-sourced marine pollution. Waste that is dumped at sea, as well as wastes from industrial, domestic, or household and agricultural sources, are run through drains or rivers. Atmospheric-sourced pollution. This type of pollution releases harmful chemicals or material to the atmosphere. It can be exhaust from factories, chemical plants, airplanes and motor vehicles. Deliberate dumping of waste, toxic and hazardous waste from vessels, aircraft, platforms and other human-made structures. Electronic gadgets dumped into the sea. Noise pollution. Environmental noise that interfere with the ability of marine animals to hear natural sounds in the ocean. This can be from military sonar, oil exploration and industrial commercial shipping. Ship-sourced marine pollution. There are two types of ship-sourced marine pollution. First is operational pollution, which for example come from routine tank cleaning operations. Next is accidental pollution, which is the result of sudden events, independent of human will. It may, for example, occur following the rupture of a pipeline, a fire or a shipwrecking. Where does the operational ship-sourced marine pollution come from? It may come to the following sources: atmospheric discharges from ship's fuel, oil from machinery and cargo spaces, chemical and other harmful substances carried as cargo, sewage, toxic substances carried in package form, and garbage. How do countries address ship-sourced pollution? Governments of the different countries in the world, through the International Maritime Organization, have created the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships in 1973 as amended by the Protocol of 1978 or Marpol 73/78. Marpol Convention. Marpol. A short form for marine pollution. It is also the name of an international convention for the prevention of environmental pollution from any sea-going vessel. Better known as Marpol 73/78. The agreement came into effect on the 2nd of November 1973 at the headquarters of the International Maritime Organization, or IMO, in London, England. The main aim for implementing Marpol was to minimize the pollution of the seas, which mainly occurs because of the dirty oil, exhaust gases, and hazardous chemicals from ships. The Marpol Convention provides utmost importance to the marine environment by completely eliminating the usage of any type of substances that can prove harmful to the environment. Marpol Convention. The convention includes regulations aimed at preventing and minimizing pollution from ships, both accidental pollution and that from routine operations. Currently includes 6 technical annexes. Annex 1. Prevention of pollution by oil. Annex 2. Control of pollution by noxious liquid substances in bulk. Annex 3. Pollution by harmful substances carried by sea in packaged form. Annex 4. Pollution by sewage from ships. Annex 5. Pollution by garbage from ships. Annex 6. Air pollution from ships. Annex 1. Prevention of pollution by oil. Entered into force on the 2nd of October 1983. The revised Annex 1 entered into force on the 1st of January 2017. Waste oil generated in a ship originates from several systems, such as the sludge, slop, bilge, and ballast water system. The input of oil to the sea from ship operations is due to illegal and legal discharges. Generally, ship-generated oily waste can either be delivered to shore, incinerated on board, legally, or illegally discharged to sea. Marpol Annex 1 refers to two sources of oil, which may be discharged into the marine environment: oil from the operation of the ship's machinery and equipment, and oil from the carriage of oil as cargo. Oil from routine ship's operations discharge requirements. The standards for the maximum amount of oil which can be discharged from a ship is 15 parts per million, or 15 ppm. This means that the water must be very pure before it is allowed to be discharged overboard. Oil, oily mixtures, engine room bilge water, sludge, and other oily residue which do not meet the discharge requirements of 15 ppm should not be discharged into the sea. It should be kept in a holding or storage tank on board for discharge to a shore reception facility. Equipment. Oil filtering equipment, or also known as oily water separators (OWS). Any ship of 400 gross tonnage and above shall be fitted with oil filtering equipment. Oil filtering equipment shall be of a design approved by the administration. It shall be provided with alarm arrangement to indicate when this level cannot be maintained. Any discharge of oily mixtures is automatically stopped when the oil content of the effluent exceeds 15 parts per million. Oil content meters (OCM). An oil content meter is an integral part of all oily water separator systems. OCM are also sometimes referred to as oil content monitors, bilge alarms, or bilge monitors. The OCM will not allow the oil concentration of the exiting water to be above the Marpol standard of 15 ppm. The oil content meter will sound an alarm if the liquid leaving the system has an unsatisfactory amount of oil in the mixture. Shipboard Oil Pollution Emergency Plan, or SOPEP. Every oil tanker of 150 gross tonnage and above, and every ship other than an oil tanker of 400 gross tonnage and above, shall carry on board a shipboard oil pollution emergency plan, approved by the administration. As a seafarer, you are required to be very familiar with your ship's SOPEP. The procedure to be followed by the master, or other persons having charge of the ship to report an oil pollution incident. The list of authorities or persons to be contacted in the event of an oil pollution incident. Detailed description of the action to be taken immediately by persons on board to reduce or control the discharge of oil following the incident. Procedures and point of contact on the ship for coordinating shipboard action with national and local authorities in combating the pollution. Oil Record Book ORB Part 1. Every oil tanker of 150 gross tonnage and above, and every ship of 400 gross tonnage and above, other than an oil tanker, shall be provided with an Oil Record Book. Part 1. Machinery Space Operations. The Oil Record Book, whether as a part of the ship's official log book, or otherwise, shall be in the form specified in the Marpol. The Oil Record Book. Part 1, shall be kept in such a place as to be readily available for inspection at all reasonable times. It shall be preserved for a period of 3 years, after the last entry has been made. If you are working in the engine room of any ship, you must fill up the ORB1. When ballasting and cleaning up fuel tanks. Discharge of dirty ballast or cleaning water from oil fuel tanks. Internal transfers of oil, engine room bilge water, sludge and other oily mixtures. Incineration of sludge or oily residue from normal ship operations. Any failure of the oil filtering system. Collection and disposal of oil residues. Discharge overboard, or disposal otherwise of bilge water, which has accumulated in machinery spaces. Discharge in order to secure the safety of the ship, or saving life at sea. Discharged because of damage to the ship, or its equipment. Any other accidental, or exceptional discharge together with the reason of discharge. Fully, and immediately record the operation, once it is completed. Have the officers in charge sign the entry, once the operation is completed. Remember, it is very important to follow your ship's rules and regulations, governing the OWS systems and its procedures, to ensure the oil sensing device works. If you do not know how to operate the OWS systems, ask your senior officer, and your superintendent. If you are not sure that the oil sensing device is working, put the oil and oily mixtures, engine room bilge water, sludge and other oily residues into your holding or storage tanks. Do not use a bypass hose to connect tanks containing oil, oily mixtures, engine room bilge water, sludge, or other oily residues to any valve, or any vessel fitting, which permits the direct discharge to the sea, without passing through the OWS. Remember, the use of a bypass hose, or magic hose, is illegal. It is subject to very severe penalties. A seafarer who uses, or who consents to the use of, a bypass hose or magic hose, shall suffer the consequences, which may include the revocation of his license. If you notice anybody using a bypass hose, or magic hose, immediately report him to the captain. If you feel that no one is listening to you, immediately call your principal, through his hotline. Be truthful. You must record accurately, and truthfully, all routine ship operations, involving oil in the ORB1. It is illegal to make untrue entries, in the oil record book. Do not tamper with, or use any means or method to distort the functioning of, the oil content meter, or, oil detection device. Oil, from the carriage of oil as cargo. If you are working on an oil tanker, you must remember that discharges of oil mixtures, from cargo spaces, is prohibited, particularly in special areas. Must meet the requirements of Annex 1, for discharges outside special areas. Discharge requirements, discharges outside special areas. Any discharge into the sea of oil or oily mixtures from the cargo area of an oil tanker, shall be prohibited except when all the following conditions are satisfied. The tanker is not within a special area. The tanker is more than 50 nautical miles from the nearest land. The tanker is proceeding en route. The instantaneous rate of discharge of oil content does not exceed 30 liters per nautical mile. Discharge requirements. Discharges outside special areas. Any discharge into the sea of oil, or oily mixtures, from the cargo area of an oil tanker, shall be prohibited, except when all the following conditions are satisfied. The total quantity of oil discharged into the sea, does not exceed for tankers delivered, on or before the 31st of December 1979. 1/15,000 of the total quantity of the particular cargo, of which the residue formed a part, and for tankers delivered after the 31st of December 1979, 1/30,000 of the total quantity of the particular cargo, of which the residue formed a part. The tanker has in operation an oil discharge monitoring and control system, and a slop tank arrangement, as required by this annex. The provisions of this regulation shall not apply to the discharge of clean, or segregated ballast. Equipment requirement. Each oil tanker must have the following: slop tank arrangements, oil discharge monitoring and control equipment, oil interface detector, crude oil washing system for tankers, which are 20,000 deadweight tonnage, or more. Oil record book ORB Part 2. Cargo or ballast operations. Every oil tanker of 150 gross tonnage and above, shall be provided with an oil record book Part 2 cargo or ballast operations. The oil record book Part 2, whether as a part of the ship's official logbook, or otherwise, shall be in the form specified in this annex, as it is maintained separately from the ORB1. You must fill up the oil record book 2. When, the oil record book Part 2, shall be completed on each occasion, on a tank-to-tank basis if appropriate, whenever any of the following cargo or ballast operations take place in the ship: loading of oil cargo, internal transfer of oil cargo during voyage, unloading of oil cargo, ballasting of cargo tanks and dedicated clean ballast tanks, cleaning of cargo tanks, including crude oil washing, discharge of ballast, except from segregated ballast tanks, discharge of water from slop tanks, closing of all applicable valves or similar devices after slop tank discharge operations, closing of valves necessary for isolation of dedicated clean ballast tanks from cargo, and stripping lines after slop tank discharge operations, disposal of residues, total quantity of oil and water used for washing, and return to the storage tank, discharge for the purpose of securing the safety of the ship, or for saving life at sea, discharge resulting from damage to the ship, or its equipment, any other accidental or exceptional discharge, and any failure of the oil discharge monitoring and control system. Remember, each operation described in this regulation shall be fully recorded without delay in the Oil Record Book ORB Part 2, so that all entries in the book appropriate to that operation are completed. Each completed operation shall be signed by the officer or officers in charge of the operations concerned, and each completed page shall be signed by the master of ship. The entries in the Oil Record Book ORB Part 2 shall be at least in English, French or Spanish. Where entries in an official language of the state whose flag the ship is entitled to fly are also used, this shall prevail in case of dispute or discrepancy. Remember, you should not mix the oil and oily mixtures from cargo operations with the oil and oily mixtures from the operation of the machinery and equipment engine room. Equipment: oil discharge monitoring and control system. Oil tankers of 150 gross tonnage and above shall be equipped with an oil discharge monitoring and control system approved by the administration. The system shall be fitted with a recording device to provide a continuous record of the discharge in liters per nautical mile and total quantity discharged. This record shall be identifiable as to time and date and shall be kept for at least 3 years. The oil discharge monitoring and control system shall come into operation when there is any discharge of effluent into the sea, and shall ensure that any discharge of oily mixture is automatically stopped when the instantaneous rate of discharge of oil exceeds that permitted by this annex. Shipboard Oil Pollution Emergency Plan or SOPEP. All oil tankers of 5,000 tons dead weight or more shall have prompt access to computerized, shore-based damage stability and residual structural strength calculation programs. This means that some kind of emergency response system or service, ERS, is required. This may be the owner's own system or registration, with an ERS offered by any of the 9 approved classification societies. Regulation 23. Accidental oil outflow performance. Apply to oil tankers delivered on or after the 1st of January 2010. This regulation specifies construction requirements to provide adequate protection against oil pollution in the event of stranding or collision. Annex 2. Noxious Liquid Substances NLS. Entered into force on the 6th of April 1987. Revised Annex 2. Entered into force the 1st of January 2007. IT refers to noxious liquid substances which are carried as cargo on a chemical or parcel tanker. If you are a seafarer working on noxious liquid substances tanker, you are required to be very familiar with the procedures and arrangements manual of your ship. This explains the physical arrangements and operational procedures with respect to cargo handling, tank cleaning, slopes handling, cargo tank ballasting and deballasting, which must be followed in accordance to the requirements of the Annex 2. Be very familiar with the Shipboard Marine Pollution Emergency Plan for noxious liquid substances carriers of your ship. This provides for the procedure to be taken in case a noxious liquid substances pollution incident involving your ship occurs. Always observe the correct stripping and discharging requirements for each category of noxious liquid substances. Prohibits the discharge into the sea of any effluent containing substances falling under these categories, except when the discharge is made under conditions which are specified in detail for each category. These conditions include, where applicable, such parameters as The maximum quantity of substances per tank which may be discharged into the sea. The speed of the ship during the discharge. The minimum distance from the nearest land during discharge. The minimum depth of water at sea during discharge. And the need to effect the discharge below the waterline. Stripping requirements. There are 4 categories for stripping requirements for noxious liquid substances tanker, identified as Category X, Y, Z and OS. The table shows the requirements of each category per type of tanker. For Category X, Y and Z they have the same requirement of 75 liters for new ships. Category X and Y have same requirements for existing IBC and existing BCH, with 100 liters plus 50 liters tolerance and 300 liters plus 50 liters tolerance respectively, and to other ships with no carriage. Category Z have different stripping requirement for existing IBC, with 300 liters plus 50 liters tolerance, while for existing BCH is 900 liters plus 50 liters tolerance. On other ships, empty tanks to the most practicable extent is the requirement. In Category OS, there's no restrictions for all types. Discharge requirements. Category X all substances are subject to pre-wash. Pre-wash shall be discharged to a shore reception facility. Subsequent washings may be discharged into the sea. Noxious liquid substances which, if discharged into the sea, from tank cleaning or deballasting operations, are deemed to present a major hazard to either marine resources or human health, and therefore justify the prohibition of the discharge into the marine environment. Category Y high viscosity and solidifying substances are subject to pre-wash. Other substances are subject to most efficient stripping. Cargo residue may be discharged into the sea. Noxious liquid substances which, if discharged into the sea, from tank cleaning or deballasting operations, are deemed to present a hazard to either marine resources or human health, or cause harm to amenities or other legitimate uses of the sea. Therefore, justify a limitation on the quality and quantity of the discharge to the marine environment. Category Z all substances are subject to the most efficient stripping. Cargo residue may be discharged into the sea. Noxious liquid substances which, if discharged into the sea, from tank cleaning or deballasting operations, are deemed to present a minor hazard to either marine resources or human health. Therefore, justify less stringent restriction on the quality and quantity of the discharge into the marine environment. Other substances which have been evaluated and found to fall outside of Category X, Y, or Z are considered to present no harm to marine resources, amenities or other legitimate uses of the sea when discharged into the sea from tank cleaning or deballasting operations. If the discharge requirements for X, Y and Z are met, the cargo residue may be discharged, provided that the ship is proceeding en route at 7 knots. It is at least 12 miles from land. It is at a depth of at least 25 meters. And the discharge is below the waterline. Cargo record book CRB. Every chemical or noxious liquid substances vessel shall be provided with a cargo record book. The following entries for operations involving all categories of substances shall be recorded. Loading of cargo. Internal transfer of cargo. Unloading of cargo. Mandatory pre-wash in accordance with the ship's procedure and arrangements manual. Cleaning of cargo tanks, except mandatory pre-wash, other pre-wash operations, final wash, ventilation etc. Discharge into the sea of tank washings. Ballasting of cargo tanks. Discharge of ballast water from cargo tanks. Accidental or other exceptional discharge. Control by authorized surveyors. Additional operational procedures and remarks. Remember, each entry shall be signed by the officer or officers in charge of the operation concerned, and each page shall be signed by the master of ship. The CRB shall be kept in such a place as to be readily available for inspection, except in the case of unmanned ships under tow, shall be kept on board the ship. It shall be retained for a period of 3 years, after the last entry has been made. Shipboard Marine Pollution Emergency Plan for noxious liquid substances. Every ship of 150 gross tonnage and above certified to carry noxious liquid substances in bulk, shall carry on board a shipboard marine pollution emergency plan for noxious liquid substances, approved by the administration. The plan shall consist at least of the procedure to be followed by the master, or other persons having charge of the ship, to report a noxious liquid substances pollution incident. The list of authorities, or persons to be contacted, in the event of a noxious liquid substances pollution incident. A detailed description of the action to be taken, immediately by persons on board to reduce, or control the discharge of noxious liquid substances following the incident. And the procedures and point of contact on the ship, for coordinating shipboard action with national and local authorities, in combating the pollution. Annex 3 Prevention of Pollution by Harmful Substances in Packaged Form. Entered into force on the 1st of July 1992. Revised Annex 3 entered into force on the 1st of October 2010. The annex covers the carriage in packaged form of harmful substances, which have been identified as marine pollutant by the International Maritime Dangerous Goods IMDG Code. The annex applies to all ships carrying harmful substances in packaged form, or in freight containers, portable tanks or road and rail tank wagons. International Maritime Dangerous Goods or IMDG Code. Developed as a uniform international code for the transport of dangerous goods by sea, covering such matters as packing, container traffic and stowage, with particular reference to the segregation of incompatible substances. IMDG was first adopted by IMO in 1965, and lists hundreds of specific dangerous goods, together with detailed advice on storage, packaging and transportation. The amendments extending the code to cover marine pollutants, which entered into force in 1991, added the identifier, marine pollutant, to all substances classed as such. All packages containing marine pollutants must be marked with a standard marine pollutant mark. Harmful substances in packaged form. Make sure that the packages are durably marked with the correct technical name of the substance. The label states that the package contains a marine pollutant. The label will survive at least 3 months immersion in salt water. The shipping documents contain the correct technical name of the substance and the warning marine pollutant, and must be made available to the person or organization designated by the Port State Authority. Also make sure that a special list or manifest is prepared, covering the harmful substances being shipped and their location on board. A detailed stowage plan is prepared, showing their location on board. A copy of the special manifest and detailed stowage plan must be made available before the ship's departure to the person or organization designated by the Port State Authority. The cargo is properly and carefully stowed to minimize hazards. Please note that reference to documents does not preclude the use of electronic data processing (EDP) and electronic data interchange (EDI) transmission techniques as an aid to paper documentation. Remember, the jettisoning of a harmful substance carried in packaged form is prohibited, except if necessary for the purpose of securing the safety of the ship or saving life at sea. Appropriate measures based on the physical, chemical and biological properties of the harmful substance must be taken to regulate any washing of leakages overboard, in accordance with Manx Shipping Notice 056, provided that compliance with those measures would not impair the safety of the ship or people on board. In accordance with the IMDG Code, Chapter 7.9.1.1, the Department of Economic Development may issue an exemption from specific provisions of the IMDG Code concerning the transport of a harmful substance, if it is satisfied that the alternative transport provisions are at least as effective and safe as those required by that code. A copy of an exemption issued in accordance with paragraph 1 must accompany each consignment when offered to the carrier for transport under the terms of the exemption. A paper or electronic copy of the exemption must also be maintained on board each ship transporting a harmful substance in accordance with the exemption. The recipient of the exemption must notify other competent authorities concerned prior to any shipment covered by that exemption. Annex 4, Sewage. entered into force on the 27th of September 2003. Annex 4 contains a set of regulations regarding the discharge of sewage into the sea from ships, including regulations regarding the ship's equipment, systems for the control of sewage discharge, the provision of facilities at ports and terminals for the reception of sewage, and requirements for survey and certification. Every seafarer must be familiar with the sewage treatment facilities of his ship. He must know how to use the equipment and properly dispose of any sewage on board. Shipboard sewage pollution sources. These are the sources for sewage pollutions, including drainage and other wastes from any form of toilets and urinals, drainage from medical premises, dispensary, sick bay, etc. via wash basins, wash tubs and scuppers located in such premises, drainage from spaces containing living animals, other wastewaters when mixed with the drainages defined above. Regulations not applicable to the disposal of drainage from dishwasher, shower, laundry, bath and wash basin drains grey water. Discharge requirements. The discharge of sewage into the sea is prohibited, except when the ship is discharging comminuted and disinfected sewage, using an approved system at a distance of more than 3 nautical miles from the nearest land. The ship is discharging sewage, which is not comminuted and disinfected, at a distance of more than 12 nautical miles from the nearest land. Provided that in any case, the sewage stored in holding tanks or sewage originating from spaces containing living animals shall not be discharged instantaneously, but at a moderate rate when ship is en route, and proceeding at not less than 4 knots. The ship is discharging sewage, using an approved sewage treatment plant. Control of discharged sewage based on discharge distance. While operating within 3 nautical miles from the nearest land, discharge is prohibited, unless properly treated in approved sewage treatment plant. Discharge within 3 to 12 nautical miles from nearest land must either meet effluent requirements within 3 nautical miles from nearest land, or the ship is discharging comminuted and disinfected sewage, using an approved comminutor or disinfection system. Discharge at a distance of more than 12 nautical miles from nearest land must either meet effluent requirements within 3 nautical miles, or within 3 to 12 nautical miles from the nearest land. The sewage that has been stored in holding tanks shall not be discharged instantaneously, but at a moderate rate, when the ship is en route and proceeding at not less than 4 knots. Passenger discharge requirements. Passenger ships operating in the Baltic Sea, or any other designated special areas, intending to discharge treated sewage effluent, must operate an approved sewage treatment plant, which meets the stringent nitrogen and phosphorus removal standard. Equipment requirements. Every ship must have a holding tank for the retention of all sewage, which has a means to visually indicate the amount of its contents. Standard discharge connections, which will allow it to connect to shore reception facilities. A sewage treatment plant. A sewage comminuting and disinfecting system. Remember, the discharge of sewage into the sea is allowed when securing the safety of life for the ship, or the discharge of sewage is as result from damage to a ship or its equipment, if all reasonable precautions have been taken before and after the occurrence of the damage, for the purpose of preventing or minimizing the discharge. Annex 5, Garbage. Entered into force on the 31st of December 1988. Revised Annex 5 under Regulation MEPC 70, came into effect the 1st of March 2018. Annex 5 totally prohibits of the disposal of plastics anywhere into the sea, and severely restricts discharges of other garbage from ships into coastal waters and special areas. What is garbage? It refers to all kinds of food, domestic and operational waste, excluding fresh fish generated during the normal operation of the vessel, and liable to be disposed continuously or periodically. Garbage management plan on board. The following ships must have a garbage management plan on board. Ships which have 100 gross tonnage or above, or ships which can carry 15 persons or more. The regulation also requires every ship of 12 meters or more in length to display placards notifying passengers and crew of the disposal requirements of the regulation. The placards should be in the official language of the ship's flag state, and also in English or French for ships traveling to other states' ports or offshore terminals. Garbage management plan procedures on garbage minimization, garbage collection, garbage storage, garbage processing, garbage disposal, equipment used on board for handling of garbage, the designation of the person or persons in charge for implementing the garbage management plan. Garbage must be grouped into the following categories. Plastics. Garbage that consists of, or includes plastic in any form, including synthetic ropes, synthetic fishing nets, plastic garbage bags, and incinerator ashes from plastic products. Domestic waste. Garbage generated mainly in the accommodation spaces on board the ship. E.g. drinking bottles, papers, cardboard, etc. Cooking oil. Edible oil, or animal fat used for the preparation or cooking of food. Food waste. Spoiled, or unspoiled food substances. Incinerator ashes. Ash and clinkers, resulting from shipboard incinerators used for the incineration of garbage. Operational waste. Solid waste. Including slurries that are collected on board during normal maintenance, or operations of a ship, or used for cargo stowage and handling. Operational wastes also includes cleaning agents and additives, contained in cargo hold and external wash water, that may be harmful to the aquatic environment. Cargo residues. Non-harmful to marine environment or non-HME, and harmful to marine environment or HME remnants of any cargo which remain on the deck, or in holds, following loading or unloading. This category does not include cargo dust remaining on the deck after sweeping, or dust on the external surfaces of the ship. Animal carcasses. Bodies of any animals that are carried on board as cargo, and that die, or are euthanized, during the voyage. Fishing gear. Physical device that may be placed on, or in the water, or on the seabed with the intended purpose of capturing marine, or freshwater organisms. E-waste. Electrical and electronic equipment, used for the normal operation of the ship, or in the accommodation spaces, including all components, sub-assemblies and consumables, which are part of the equipment at the time of discarding, with the presence of material potentially hazardous to human health, and/or the environment. Disposal of garbage outside special areas. No plastics in the oceans or seas. The disposal into the sea of all plastics, including but not limited to synthetic ropes, synthetic fishing nets, plastic garbage bags, and incinerator ashes from plastic products, which may contain toxic or heavy metal residues, is prohibited. The disposal into the sea of the following garbage shall be made as far as practicable from the nearest land, but in any case is prohibited if the distance from the nearest land is less than 25 nautical miles. Dunnage, lining and packing materials which will float. 12 nautical miles. Food wastes and all other garbage, including paper products, rags, glass, metal, bottles, crockery, and similar refuse. 3 nautical miles. Paper products, rags, glass, metal, bottles, crockery, and similar refuse which has passed through a comminutor, or grinder. Special requirements for disposal of garbage. Garbage from fixed or floating platforms, located more than 12 nautical miles from land, and all other ships, when alongside or within 500 miles of such platforms, may be permitted. Provided. Food wastes may be permitted, when they have been passed through a grinder. Such comminuted, or ground food wastes, shall be capable of passing through a screen, with openings no greater than 25 millimeters. Disposal should be not less than 3 nautical miles from the nearest land. Only food waste which has passed through a comminutor, or grinder can be disposed of in the Caribbean area. Garbage record book. In addition to the garbage management plan, every ship of 400 gross tonnage and above, and every ship which is certified to carry 15 persons or more engaged in voyages to ports or offshore terminals under the jurisdiction of other parties to the convention, and every fixed and floating platform engaged in exploration and exploitation of the seabed, shall be provided with a garbage record book. Maintaining garbage record book. Each discharge operation, or completed incineration, shall be recorded in the garbage record book and signed for on the date of the incineration or discharge by the officer in charge. Each completed page of the garbage record book shall be signed by the master of the ship. Where the entries are also made in an official language of the state whose flag the ship is entitled to fly, these entries shall prevail in case of a dispute or discrepancy. The entry for each incineration or discharge shall include date and time, position of the ship, description of the garbage, and the estimated amount incinerated or discharged. The garbage record book shall be kept on board the ship, and in such a place as to be available for inspection in a reasonable time. This document shall be preserved for a period of 2 years, after the last entry is made on the record. In the event of discharge, escape or accidental loss, referred to in Regulation 6 of this annex, an entry shall be made in the garbage record book, of the circumstances of, and the reasons for the loss. Remember, the disposal of garbage from a ship, necessary for the purpose of securing the safety of a ship, and those on board or saving life at sea, or the escape of garbage resulting from damage to a ship, or its equipment, provided all reasonable precautions have been taken, before and after the occurrence of the damage, for the purpose of preventing, or minimizing the escape, or the accidental loss of synthetic fishing nets, provided that all reasonable precautions have been taken to prevent such loss. Annex 6, Air Pollution from Ships. Entered into force on the 19th of May 2005. Revised Annex 6, entered into force the 1st of July 2010. Limits the main air pollutants contained in ships' exhaust gas, including sulfur oxides and nitrous oxides, and prohibits deliberate emissions of ozone-depleting substances. Marpol Annex 6 also regulates shipboard incineration and the emissions of volatile organic compounds from tankers. Requirements of Annex 6. The ship's engine and equipment must comply with the NOx technical code. The sulfur content of any fossil fuel used by the ship must meet the requirements of the annex. The ship must purchase fuel only from the accredited, local fuel suppliers of the port state. The ship must not engage in any deliberate emission of ozone-depleting substances, particularly chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs. Prohibited incineration. The following are prohibited: cargo residues of oil, noxious liquid substances, harmful substances in package form and related packing material, polychlorinated biphenyls PCBs, garbage which contains more than traces of heavy metals, refines petroleum products containing halogen compounds, polyvinyl chlorides PVCs, unless the ship's incinerator is IMO type approved for the purpose. Requirements for the purchase of fuel oil. Purchase fuel oil only from the port state control approved suppliers. Make sure that every delivery of fuel oil is covered by bunker delivery note. Make sure that the fuel supplier provides a sample of the fuel oil covered by the bunker delivery note. Keep the bunker delivery note on board the ship, and retain the copy for a period of 3 years after delivery on board. Keep the sample fuel oil together with the bunker delivery note. Ensure that the sample is sealed and signed by the supplier's representative and the master, or officer in charge of bunker operations, on completion of the bunkering operations. Retain the sample under the ship's control until the fuel oil is substantially consumed, but in no case less than a period of 12 months from delivery. Special Areas, Marpol Annex 1 to 6. Special Areas means sea area where, for recognized technical reasons, in relation to its oceanographical and ecological condition, and to the particular character of its traffic, the adoption of special mandatory methods for the prevention of sea pollution by oil, noxious liquid substances, and garbage, is required. Annex 1 Oil Special Areas. Mediterranean Sea, Baltic Sea, Black Sea, Red Sea, Gulfs Area, Gulf of Aden, Antarctic Area, Northwest European Waters, Oman Area of the Arabian Sea, Southern South African Waters. Annex 2, Noxious Liquid Substances, Special Areas, Antarctic Area. Annex 4 Sewage, Special Areas, Baltic Sea. Annex 5 Garbage, Special Areas, Mediterranean Sea, Baltic Sea, Black Sea, Red Sea, Gulf area, North Sea, Antarctic area south of latitude 60 degrees south. Wider Caribbean region, including the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. Annex 6 Prevention of air pollution by ships. Emission control areas. Baltic Sea, North Sea, North American emission control areas. United States Caribbean Sea emission control areas. Additional information. Emission control areas ECAs, or sulfur emission control areas SECAs, are sea areas in which stricter controls were established to minimize airborne emissions from ships, as defined by Marpol Annex 6. Marpol 2020. Sulfur limit. From 2020, regulation for sulfur content in fuel oil will be tightened by Marpol 2020 global sulfur limit to reduce the amount of sulfur oxide emitting from ships. What is 2020 global sulfur limit? 2020 global sulfur limit is to be implemented to improve major health and environmental benefits for the world, particularly for populations living close to ports and coasts, by drastically reducing the amount of sulfur oxide emitting from ships. IMO has set regulation to limit sulfur content in fuel oil to less than 0.5, which will take effect on the 1st of January 2020. Current global limit for sulfur content in fuel oil is 3.5. Vessel operators will have three compliance options. Utilize IMO-compliant fuel with a maximum sulfur content of 0.5 lsf. Continue to burn high-sulfur fuel with a maximum sulfur content of 3.5 hsf, but only if the vessel is equipped with an exhaust gas cleaning system, EGCS or scrubber. The vessel obtains a fuel oil non-availability report, FONR, due to the lack of available compliant fuel. Or, utilize an acceptable alternative marine fuel, such as liquefied natural gas. Please like and follow Only the Legitimate MMC Facebook page at Magsay Maritime Corporation PH. Thank you.